Hello, and in this video I want to address my political activism record with an eye towards explaining how I arrived at Marxism. And when I say Marxism, I say it in quotations because Karl Marx was very clear with the statement, all I know is that I am not a Marxist. Okay? So Karl Marx did not want to be associated with the label Marxist because he was afraid that his method of analysis would be turned into the basis for political religion. And unfortunately, that did happen. Certain variables of Trotskyism and certain variables of Maoism became forms of secular political religion based on Marxism. And, one specific example is Gonzalo thought. So Marx was anticipated that these negative developments might happen, and that is why he said, all I know is that I am not a Marxist. So when I say Marxism, I mean very, very simply, Marxism is a method of analysis that enables you to look at the concrete reality of the political economy so that you can then derive a political program that would enable you to effect the transition from capitalism to communism via socialism. And by communism, I mean a society that will have no classes, a society where money will not be necessary, a society where the state will wither away, and a society where there will be no rigid gender roles imposed on individuals. Okay? So there will be no gender, no state, no money, and no classes under communism. And communism, of course, is a political economy where the technical organization of production and the social organization of labor are contextualized by the voluntary association of collective and cooperative groups. Okay, and all of it is premised upon workers' control of the means of production. Okay, that is what I mean by Marxism. Okay, a method of analysis that enables you to come up with a political program. Nothing else. It is not meant to be the basis for a secular political religion or anything like that. Okay, so that said, my political activism record begins when I was 19 years old in 1994, 1995, and my first experience of activism was the Animal Liberation Front, and this was in the South Florida area, the Dade, Broward counties, where Dade is where Miami is located and Broward is where Fort Lauderdale and other places are located, in Coral Springs, etc. So in the Dade and Broward county area in South Florida is where I was living. I mean, I am not an American citizen. Okay, I was not born in the United States. I was born elsewhere in the Caribbean, but at the age of 3, I was taken to Florida, and I was raised in Florida I was raised in Florida, and I lived in Florida until the age of 23. So for 20 years, I lived in Florida. And that is the reason I speak English with a Florida accent, I'm told. But yeah, when I was 23, I was forced to leave because I could no longer stay in the United States. There was no avenue for me to stay legally in the United States, so I had to leave. So, and I will talk about that later, but just so that we're clear, I was raised in this South Florida, Dade and Broward, and it was in Dade and Broward where I became involved with Animal Liberation Front and also with Queer Nation, right? But my involvement with Animal Liberation Front was derived from my interest in radical ecology, and people from my generation, when we were young, in the early 1990s, we were, well, people Generation X, which is the generation I am part of, was very much interested in radical ecology. So, the fashionable radical ecology movement at the time was Earth First. However, in South Florida, there is not much of a context for Earth First activity. I mean, in South Florida, there are no forests, such as those that exist in the Pacific Northwest. So, I mean, there was no possibility to engage in tree sitting or anything like that. So, there was no context really for Earth First in South Florida. So the other thing that we could do that was radical ecology was Animal Liberation Front. That's what I became involved with. In the little group that I was involved with, Animal Liberation Front, South Florida, we were about eight to ten people who were involved in that. We did a lot of joint activity. Sometimes, not a lot. Sometimes we did joint work with PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. However, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals and Animal Liberation Front, are antagonistic because, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals considers Animal Liberation Front to be extremists. And in the inverse, people involved with Animal Liberation Front consider People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals to be sellouts. Okay, so that was the thing. However, I did meet a lot of people who were involved with PETA and whatever. I understand we were on the same side, right? We just had different strategies and a different analysis. So yeah, activities that I did with the Animal Liberation Front, most of what we did was tag. We did a lot of tagging up in Palm Beach, because up in Palm Beach there is shops that sell furs and stuff. Palm Beach is very affluent. A lot of rich people live up there. So if you go to in downtown Palm Beach, there is like shops and stuff that sell furs and whatever. At least this was back in the 90s, and 94, 95, and sometimes there were advertisements for these shops and things, and we did some tagging. We used to tag advertisements and whatever, and a couple of times we did a stage protest against fur. We did a protest campaign in one university in Miami that allegedly was receiving funding or investment or whatever from the cosmetics industry, which is the cosmetics industry uses rabbits to like test their products and whatever, to experiment. Yeah, so that's the kind of activity we were involved with in Animal Liberation Front. It wasn't anything very, very extreme. Like, I didn't participate in the liberation of animals from like a lab or anything like that, or like ecotage or whatever. We never did like we never went that far as to it was in retrospect, the activism that I compared to like the Animal Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Movement in Britain, which is very militant. We in South Florida were very mild, so but it was a formative experience. It was my first activism, organized, whatever. Yeah, and and the reason I chose Animal Liberation Front over People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals is because being 19 years old, I was attracted to the radicals, right? So, and then another type of activism that I was involved with in South Florida, Dade Broward, was Queer Nation. And a Queer Nation was an effort to bring visibility to gay and lesbian visibility, right? And but Queer Nation was mostly focused on gay men. For the lesbians, they had Lesbian Avengers, and they were a bit more militant. So we did collaborative work in Queer Nation with Lesbian Avengers to do like visibility stunts, to like bring visibility to the fact that we are here, we are queer, get used to it. So with Queer Nation, what I did was very innocuous. For example, we would they would set us up in pairs of two, like, yeah, in pairs of two, and then you and your partner we would go to the business district in Miami where all the bank buildings are, and we would there is this metro mover that covers downtown Miami, which is attached to, there is the Miami in Miami, the subway it's not a subway, it's an elevated train like in Chicago, but it's only one line. And then in the downtown Miami, in the business district, they have the metro mover. So in that area where the metro mover is, that's where the business district, the bank buildings, whatever, we would walk around there holding hands. Two guys holding hands. We would walk and then kiss. We would sit in like a park bench and like you know, whatever, like pet each other or whatever. I mean, nothing sexual. There was no sexuality. I mean, we would never grab each other's, you know, private crotches or anything like that. It was mostly, you know, petting, kissing, holding hands, whatever, just to show visibility that you know, gay men exist, right? To bring visibility. Again, the whole premise was we're here, we're queer, get used to it. So that's the kind of activity that I did mostly with Queer Nation. So that's how I got started in 1994 and 1995. That is, of course, a pre-political. This is parapolitical work. That was not political activism technically. This is parapolitical activism. And you know, parapolitical is different from political in that the parapolitical is non-political activity that has political implications. So Animal Liberation Front and Queer Nation are technically not political activism. They're parapolitical. So I started with the parapolitical, right? Now, when I really started with political activism and activity was in 1996. And I'm reading from an outline that I made so that I can organize my thoughts. In 1996, I became a volunteer with the Ralph Nader presidential campaign in the South Florida area in Dade Broward, and I was a physical volunteer. Most of the work that I did was hand out leaflets in university campuses. Yeah, because I was at the time I was 21. So yeah, so they thought, well, you can go and hand out leaflets in the university campuses in Miami, and I went to like 2 or 3 of them, handing out leaflets for Ralph Nader, trying to get the students to promoting Ralph Nader among the university students to see if it panned out anything, whatever. That's most of what I did with them. But what attracted me to the Ralph Nader presidential campaign is, number one, that he agreed with the issue of animal rights and radical ecology. He was sympathetic to the viewpoint of people who espouse, you know, animal rights and radical ecology. So he was very much in tune with Generation X, which was us, the youth in that time. You know, he was in tune with us, and that's why I like Ralph Nader. He also was an advocate of universal health care, and I thought that was a really, really good idea. You know, the idea of universal health care, and yeah, and you know, so, and also the idea of you know, I got introduced to the idea, the perspective of workers' rights from that campaign. So you know that, you know, and the fundamental premise, I mean, from a Marxist perspective, in retrospect, Ralph Nader was just a left centrist at best. Really, he had a foot, and he was really he was a classic social democrat, a classic left centrist social democrat. However, what was attractive about him is that he was anti-centrist. Ralph Nader was anti-centrist because what happened when Bill Clinton took over the Democrat Party after 1992 was that the Democrat Party became taken over by these centrists. So centrism was imposed as a dogma on the Democrat Party, and centrism is anti-leftist. So there was a purge of any social democrat and leftist elements from the Democrat Party. And now what happened was that those people that were purged and those people who were marginalized, you know, reorganized, regathered around the figure of Ralph Nader, and that is when the Ralph Nader movement started as a left centrist, as a left anti-centrist. Is weird because he, from a Marxist perspective, he's a left centrist, but he was actually an anti-centrist, right? And I mean, the definition of centrism is in Marxism is very different from the definition of centrism in bourgeois politics. In Marxism, centrism means a person who has a foot in revolution and a foot in reformism, who vacillates between reform and revolution. Ralph Nader was had no revolutionary component to him. He was entirely reformist. So so from the perspective of Marxism, he was a left centrist, a left reformist, but in context of the political spectrum in the United States in 1996, he was an anti-centrist because centrism is what dominated the Democrat Party under Bill Clinton. So he was an anti-centrist in the sense of being an opponent of the politics of Bill Clinton from the left. That's yeah. And yeah, again, it's very crucial to understand the definitions here. There are the different definitions. You know, the bourgeois definition of centrism is one thing, and the Marxist definition of centrism is another. So you gotta be knowledgeable of both definitions to be able to understand Ralph Nader. Okay, um, yeah. So, anyways, he was for animal rights. He was for radical ecology. He was for universal healthcare. And that was the first time I got. That is how I got started politically. That was my first political activity, handing out leaflets for Ralph Nader in university campuses in Miami. That was me, right? That was my first political activity, handing out leaflets. Now, what happened is that um, I became exposed to Marxist politics, though, or a version of Marxist politics, the revisionist Trotskyist version of Marxist politics, because the International Socialist Organization uh, in 1996 fully endorsed and supported Ralph Nader. So their members became campaign volunteers, you know, and the only rule was that they were not allowed to speak about the politics of the ISO in context of the campaign. They had to participate as volunteers, as individuals, and they had to follow the talking points of the campaign. As long as they did that, they could participate, and they agreed. However, in private, they could talk to you about the ISO, and this is what happened. I became friends with some of these people, because I was 21, so they came to me to like talk to me and whatever. They were interested in why are you supporting Ralph Nader, and I told them, well, I was involved with the Animal Liberation Front and and Queer Nation, and Ralph Nader supports queer rights, and he supports animal liberation and whatever, and I'm for that. So and yeah, and whatever, and they say, oh yeah, that's cool, whatever. What do you think about what Ralph Nader has to say about healthcare and all these other issues? And say, oh yeah, I'm all for that. Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, and then they started talking to me about how in the Declaration of Human Rights, that the United States is the only industrialized country in the world where healthcare is not a human right, and that is, it proves that American democracy is deeply flawed and is one of the many proofs of it. And there are other issues also that demonstrate that this is not the idea that this is a democracy is not true, according to the ISO people. And that's how I got introduced to the politics of the ISO. And they sold me a copy of Socialist Worker, and I started reading Socialist Worker, and I got into the ISO. And I became I became somebody who was a follower of the politics of the ISO. Even though I never joined, I wasn't ready to join a Marxist organization then, because when you were Generation X, Marxism was dead. Marxism was dead language. It was like communism is a crock of shit. Lenin is dead. That's retro propaganda, whatever. So I was like, I don't know, that kind of shit, that stuff that's out, because whatever. And I don't know. Right now, what matters is, I don't know, Queer Nation and animal liberation or whatever. And also, you have to, another factor that prevented me from getting too involved with the International Socialist Organization is that I was living in South Florida. And the Dade, Broward area, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that area is the Bantustan of the Cuban American National Foundation. It is the hotbed of anti-communism and anti-leftism. I mean, you can't really be too open about being whatever, Marxist or what have you. I remember one incident earlier. This is when I was still younger than that, 16 or whatever, because when I was 16, I became interested in the punk rock scene. Okay, but I'm gonna leave that. That's not political. That's pre-parapolitical. Even. But anyways, back in 1988, I think, I remember there was an incident where the Socialist Workers Party opened a bookshop in Liberty City in Miami. And the Cuban exiles got wind of it, that there were some castristas, whatever, in there opening a bookshop. And the Socialist Workers Party is openly pro Cuba, right, and pro Castro and what have you, and un grupo castrista, whatever. Yeah, in our midst, the enemy, whatever. I mean, apparently, you know, there was a furor about this, a scandal or whatever. There were these people in there, and for what I gather, three of them were brave enough to go into, you know, downtown Miami and walk around trying to sell the Militant, which is their newspaper, and they almost got lynched. They almost got, you know, physically assaulted. I mean, they were verbally abused and, you know, whatever, run out of town, run out of the center of Miami. So the police looked the other way, of course, uh, because these people support Castro. How dare you come here, whatever. I mean, that was provocative. That was brave and provocative of those people from the Socialist Workers Party. You know, and anyways, what ended up happening is they torched their bookstore. So yeah, so that gives you like an idea of just at the time in the late 80s and early 90s, you know, South Florida was not, you know, the Dade and Broward County, you know, area was not the place to espouse, you know, any type of Marxist politics, even if it is the type espoused by the ISO, which is, you know, a sort of like revisionist Trotskyism, the American version of revisionist Trotskyism associated with Tony Cliff. You know, even if you say that the Soviet Union is not communist, that the Soviet Union is state capitalist, and that is not really communism, whatever, still, the fact that you call yourself Marxist and that you support Marx or whatever means that you are like suspect. So that was another reason why. I mean, I did read some other stuff, you know, and they did publish something that I wrote about a demonstration. Uh, I participated with them in a demonstration, okay, in 97, 96 or 97. I think it was a year later, in 97. And, you know, I wrote a comment about that demonstration, which they published in Socialist Worker, you know. So I thought that was, I was like flattered by that, you know, being, I don't know, 20, 22 or whatever. Why would anybody want to read what a 22-year-old has to write? That was what I thought, but they did. They thought it was important what I had to say, and I was flattered. Okay. Yeah. Anyways. Right. So now I come to the part. I left the United States in 1998 because there was no avenue for me to stay there legally anymore. Actually, the entire for most of the 22 years that I lived in the United States, I was undocumented. I was an undocumented child. So, you know, I mean, when you are a minor, you're allowed to go to school if you're undocumented, but at least at the time when I went to school, it was okay. I don't know now, but back then in you know, 80s and early 90s, it was okay, but I don't know. But anyways, I grew up undocumented. But I mean, by the age of 23, and you know, it became obvious, you know, 22, 23, that I cannot stay in the United States. There is no avenue for me to become legal here, and I am not going to live like this for the rest of my life. So I thought I need to change scenery drastically. So the first thing I did is I went to Canada first. I was in Montreal, Canada for a few months. Yeah, in August of 98, I think it was. August 98 to about April 99, I was in Montreal, Canada. And, you know, Canada, you know, didn't work out because Canada is not really that much different from the United States. You know, there was no avenue for me to stay legally in Canada either. Canada is even harder to get into than the United States. So I had to, you know, unfortunately, to cross borders, I had to rely on clandestine means to do that. And I managed to obtain, through clandestine means, I managed to obtain travel documents. And on those travel documents, with those travel documents, I was able to apply for a Dutch visa. And then I was approved, a 1-year student visa to the Netherlands. And so I moved to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, Netherlands in April of 1999. I flew from Montreal to Amsterdam via Paris on Air France, business class. You know, in Amsterdam, Eventually in Amsterdam, I found a job working for a dot-com incubator in the marketing department. So I was doing, and I've made a video already about my experience with business school in Amsterdam. But I worked in that dot-com incubator in the marketing department, and I was pretty much promoting IPOs. Now, as part of the benefits of working for that dot-com incubator, they had a relationship with a business school in Amsterdam called Amsterdam Institute of Technical Analysis, and I went there, and it was a very small, exclusive business school. And I've already talked about this in another video. I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm going to put a link in the description to that video where I talk about my business school experience in Amsterdam. But while I was working in that dot-com incubator, and while I was attending the AITA business school in Amsterdam, on the side, on a clandestine basis, on a semi-clandestine, semi-secret basis, which I palmed off as entertainment, I was involved with Reclaim the Streets, right? And Reclaim the Streets in Amsterdam, Netherlands, was basically Reclaim the Streets in 1999 and 2000. And I was in Amsterdam between April 1999 and February 2001, March 2001. And I had a permit the whole time. First I had a 1-year permit, and then they extended it for 6 months. So that's how I lived in Amsterdam. But then when I applied to have it extended the second time, they say no, so I had to leave. And then I came to Sweden. I went to first I went to Germany, then I went to Denmark, then Sweden, then Norway, then Sweden, Norway, right? And but anyways, Reclaim the Streets. It was an anarchist movement in the 1990s. Reclaim the Streets, and the idea was that it was a reaction against neoliberalism, gentrification, the takeover of the commons by privatization, and neoliberal market economics or whatever. So it was resistance against privatization and the takeover of the commons by capitalism. So and they were all into, like, they were into animal rights, they were into radical ecology, they were into food not bombs, they were into no human is illegal. They are the ones who exposed me to no human is illegal in Reclaim the Streets. They etc. They were into animal liberation big time. So what they did is they organized street raves, and I was involved in that effort of organizing and leafleting at the street raves. So what they would do is they would set up a street rave for about 2 or 3 hours at a random place in Amsterdam, in a random street in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, and without any permit. It was a spontaneous boom. The rave started, and when the police came, they would pack up and move on, right? The police seldomly ever came in the raves. The raves usually lasted 2 or 3 hours. They were like flash raves, right? And what happened was that as opposed to a demonstration, it was more fun to have a street rave. So each street rave would have a theme. So so one time it was Animal Liberation Front. Next time it was Food Not Bombs. Next time it was No Human is Illegal, etc. And then obviously the overall arching umbrella theme was Reclaim the Commons. So while people were dancing, raving, or whatever, Legalize It was another one. Legalize It, and I have a leaflet from that era here, right here. See, this is the Legalize It street rave. This is one of the raves that I helped organize, the Legalize Street Rave with Reclaim the Streets Amsterdam. This is from, as you can see, this is very old, legalize.org, and they were trying to promote legalization of marijuana, because in the Netherlands, in the Netherlands at the time, marijuana is decriminalized but not really legal. It's just decriminalized. But yeah, so, and you can see the text of the leaflet is in Dutch, and I don't read Dutch. I never learned to read Dutch. Jag kan läsa det svenska men inte nederländska. Så jag kan inte förstå nederländska men jag läser det. Jag kan inte läsa det. I cannot read Dutch. I can read Swedish but not Dutch. So please forgive my Swedish pronunciation. Anyways, it says, yeah, you see here. This was 27th of May 1999. This was very short after I arrived. No, excuse me. This was 27 May 2000. 27 May 2000. It says here at 12 noon, right? And it was a flash rave, and it's Dance Amsterdam, as you can see here. Dance Amsterdam, whatever. So this is one of the raves. And this was one theme. There was also No Human is Illegal, Food Not Bombs, and Animal Liberation Front, and Legalize It. Those are the four big ones that I helped organize in Amsterdam. The street rave scene, and it's an alternative to demonstrations, and a fun alternative to demonstrations. So this is what I was doing clandestinely in Amsterdam, while working at the dot-com incubator and going to this radical neoliberal business school, where they thought that greed is good, branding defines culture, and that business is an amoral environment. On the side as an alter ego thing, to like atone for my sins, maybe, I don't know, whatever. It wasn't atone for my sins. It was an alter ego thing, yeah. I was too young to understand atonement of sin when I was 23, but this is what I was into, right? So yeah. So this was my entertainment. I would have palmed this off as entertainment, right? But yeah. Anyways, yeah. Legalized street raves. And I see already this video is going on 32 minutes. So I'm going to stop here, and I will be back with part 2. Okay.